Welcome back to Cinema Summary. Today I am going to explain a sci-fi, romance film from 2016, titled Passengers. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. On its route to Homestead 2, a colonized world, the interstellar spaceship Avalon can be seen traveling across space. All of the ship's quarters are empty, and it's on autopilot. The 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers have been put to sleep. The ship unintentionally enters an asteroid belt, compromising its defenses. The ship's power has been directed to the primary shield, but it is about to collide with a behemoth asteroid. The asteroid slams into the ship, triggering several faults. On the other hand, one of the hibernation pods activates, and the ship begins self-repairs. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, is the passenger who has been awakened. When his pod opens, an automated process assists him in waking up and assures him of his safety. The spaceship has been in suspended animation for 120 years, and it will land at Homestead in just 4 months. He's been told that he'll be able to relax and enjoy the ship's amenities during that period. Jim learns about his ID band, his cabin, and the primary tasks he'll be performing to take part in. Prior to landing on the planet, he gets ready and departs his cabin, both excited and terrified to meet the other passengers on board, and goes into a computer-assisted class for a big number of kids. Jim feels concerned when the hologram describes the situation on Earth. The city is suffocatingly congested, expensive, and overrated. It tells him to wait until the end of the lesson to ask questions, but Jim can't help but wonder why he's the only one there. He realizes the hologram is incapable of responding to him and sets out to discover other people. He makes his way to the main concourse of the ship. There are no other people around, but an automated information desk is available to help. Jim is instructed to speak with a steward when he wishes to speak with a live person, but when he arrives, he is dissatisfied. When he notices that no one else is present, he approaches the captain and asks to talk with him. He realizes that none of the major crew members are awake, despite the fact that he does not have clearance to enter the bridge. After making his way to the observatory, Jim realizes that the ship is 90 years old. Homestead 2 will be released in a few years. He returns to the concourse, believing he has awoken too soon, to deliver a message. He arrives to Earth, unsure of what to do because he has forgotten how to hibernate. The communication system informs him that if he makes an overpriced call to Earth, he will receive an answer in 55 years. Jim is devastated. He wanders around until he finds the ship's bar, where he meets another person. As he converses with the bartender, something weird about him emerges. As he tries to fetch him a drink, Jim realizes he's an android. The creature's name is Arthur. Jim wants to know more about him, but he's not sure how to tell the robot that I'm not sure how he'll manage to get there early. Jim wakes up in his cabin the next day and proceeds to the cantina, where he quickly realizes that the majority of the menu items are only available to gold-class passengers. He makes himself a cup of regular coffee and mulls about how to fix his hibernation chamber. After getting all of the necessary tools, he is able to get it to function and lies down inside of pod. Nothing, however, happens. He then chooses to use the tools he discovered to access the crew's hibernation chambers. That's also not going to work. Small incidents happen all throughout the ship. Jim returns to the bar to drink and, more importantly, to converse with Arthur. After some advice from the robot, he decides to break into one of the ship's gold-class quarters and have some fun. Jim goes to every restaurant, game, and entertainment system he can get his hands on. However, as time passes, he becomes increasingly dissatisfied of his alone. One day, he becomes inebriated and travels about the hibernation pods, where he encounters a spacewalking airlock with spacesuits. Jim puts on his suit and goes to the airlock, where he opens the door by pressing a lever and then a button. He's enthralled by the view after he's alight from the ship. At that specific time, he is the only conscious human being present. Jim, distraught, lets go of the magnets on his boots and floats in space. He goes back inside, takes off the suit, and enters the airlock without it. He pulls the lever, ready to end it all, but then reverses his decision, sprints back inside, and drops a bottle. When Jim rises, he's captivated to Aurora, a woman in one of the pods. He becomes captivated in her story as he searches the directories for her files and listens to her passenger interview. I'm head over heels in love with her. Following that, he was seen sitting next to her pod, listening in on her interviews. He's reading some of her work in the pub and discussing her writing with Arthur. He's distracted with the absurdity of his situation. He's traveling to another planet in search of a better life, he's getting up early and not making it, and he's discovered his perfect lover, only to discover she's out of reach. Jim can't get her out of his mind, and he has the idea to wake her awake. He talks to the robot about it, but he's baffled by the issue. If he wakes her up for his own gain, he'll be abandoning her to die in the ship. Jim initially rejects the concept, but as time goes on, he finds himself unable to do so. Until one day he changes his mind. He locates her pod and successfully turns it on. He hides and reappears as she awakens and undergoes the same procedure as he did to his personal space. He comes to the main concourse a little while later, hoping to get a glimpse of her, and there she is, puzzled, exactly like he was a year ago. Jim takes her to the observatory and informs her that they are the only people awake. He then tells her that he can't get in touch with the crew or the ship's primary control. Aurora is afraid and desperately wants to get back to her pod. When they arrive, Jim informs them that the ship lacks any special equipment that can assist them in resuming their slumber, effectively alerting her to the fact that they are trapped. They return to the concourse, where he tells her to take it easy because she has just recently arrived. She pities him because he has been alone on the ship for more than a year. Jim returns to the bar, remorseful for his actions. He asks Arthur not to tell Aurora that he is the one who woke her up. The next day, Aurora awakens. She returns to the concourse and asks the automated information desk about hibernation pods. Jim meets her for breakfast, and the two of them go out to eat. As they leave, something goes wrong at the information desk. When Aurora notices that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year, she orders him one of the cantina's gold-class menus. They talk about repairing the pods, but Aurora, unlike Jim, isn't quite ready to renounce. Before arriving to a conclusion, she walks around the infirmary and then researches the records, attempting to bust through the crew's hibernation quarters doors. Around the ship, Jim discovers further problems. After a few months, Aurora laments her existence on the Avalon. As she becomes more aware of her plight, she writes, jogs around the ship, and swims in the pool. She goes to the cantina to interview Jim since she is intrigued by his story. She wonders why he came to the colony in the first place. Jim initially responds with platitudes from the corporation, but then goes on to express that he hopes he imagined himself as someone who could make a name for himself in the new world. They eventually make their way to the observatory, where Aurora finally confesses why she's there. Unlike the other passengers on board, she has a round-trip ticket. Her aim was to travel to Homestead 2 and live there for a year before returning to Earth as the first journalist to do so and write the greatest story ever told. Aurora eventually gives up on finding a solution to their current predicament, and Jim comes to the conclusion that they're doomed. Come up with a way to make her feel better. He takes her to the cinema, the dancing class, and the basketball court. Finally, he transports her to Arthur's pub, where they will meet. She relaxes for a few moments before recalling their situation. Jim is alone with the robot, and he regrets what he has done to her. The next second he's seen tinkering with something, and the next, Aurora enters the observatory to find a copy of the Chrysler building he had built for her. After a while, they go on a date to a pub. They eat breakfast together and inform each other about their lives. She tells him that her father died when she was a teenager. Jim brings Aurora to the airlock after dinner, where they don their spacesuits. They go on a spacewalk together. Jim has finally found someone with whom he can share his incredible adventure. They float in space together when Jim shuts off the magnets in their boots. They hurry back inside and kiss before retiring to his cabin and sleeping together. They begin to live together soon after. Aurora moves into his cabin and starts journaling about her stay on the ship. They jog together, eat together, and sleep together. Jim continues his spacecraft tour and comes across the hydroponics section. He presents Aurora with flowers. They go to the observatory to watch a red giant pass by the ship one day. Aurora's birthday is celebrated in one of the ship's restaurants, followed by a celebration in the bar later that evening. Jim walks to the bathroom to prepare the ring he made for Aurora while Aurora remains in the room. In the bar, Arthur and I were conversing. The android informs Aurora that Jim purposely awoke her, unaware that he was still have to keep that a secret. Jim reappears out of nowhere, leaving her stunned in his presence. She flees, enraged and terrified. When Jim returns to his cabin, he discovers that she has left all of her belongings behind. The next day, he runs into her in the cantina, but she departs as soon as he speaks. Aurora is in a dangerous situation. She goes to Jim's cabin one night and assaults him, hitting and kicking him while threatening to murder him. Jim tries to apologize and explain himself over the comm because she keeps avoiding him. Explains his feelings for her. Aurora is indifferent with his assertions that he has fallen in love with her. She can't forgive him for taking her life. While Jim is in his cabin one night, another failure occurs. A significant failure has caused the spacecraft's main command to be shut off. He then enters the elevator, which is broken. Aurora discovers a tree Jim has planted when she approaches the main concourse. She then goes to the cantina, where the food dispensary is likewise malfunctioning. Both of them hear the deck chief's voice asking over the comm who planted the oak leaf. They both sprint into the concourse, where they run into Gus Mancuso, who is standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves to the chief and explain the situation. He sees no reason for 3 pods to fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge, where he notices the ship is in distress. The information on the systems, on the other hand, must be manually validated. As they leave the bridge, a robot nearly falls on their heads, and the two of them communicate with each other. Faults have become more widespread around the ship, according to Mancuso. As he illustrates how to obtain the data, he assures them that this will not happen. Jim checks on the pods when he joins Mancuso. He's figured out what happened to Aurora's pod. Jim's acts are considered horrible by the deck chief. Aurora subsequently meets him on the bridge, where he is reviewing the data gathered. They talk about what happened to her pod, but he tells her that he can't help her. Consider it. Jim walks in with the 16th broken robot. Mancuso has hibernation sickness and goes to rest, but he coughs as he walks away. From the blood, Aurora is unable to sleep that night, so she goes swimming. Suddenly, the ship loses its sense of gravity, and she begins to perish as the water from the pool follows her. When the gravity drive is restarted, she barely makes it out alive. On their journey to find Mancuso, they run into each other. They've returned to the bridge and are attempting to piece together what's going on. With the ship, Mancuso discovers that something happened 2 years ago that resulted in the failure of a critical system. They need to figure out what caused the failure and fix it because the entire ship is trying to figure out what caused it to pick up the slack. If they do not fix it, the entire vessel will be stranded. They go to investigate the problem, but Mancuso passes out and is taken to the hospital by Jim and Aurora. He's dying, and there's nothing that can be done to make it stop or extend his life. The three of them later convene at the observatory, where Mancuso awards Jim his prize. The ID bracelet begs them to repair the ship before dying. The lights turn a frightening crimson, and the ship starts to shake. Aurora notifies Jim that he needs her help, and the two run to engineering, but the gravity drive malfunctions once more. Then there's the third one, which this time also affects Arthur. Jim shuts him down. They finally make it to engineering and begin looking for the problem's origins. They find it in the power plant, and as they open the hatch, Aurora is sucked in. The asteroid has created a hull breach in that area. Jim is also pulled in, but he manages to keep his grip on the hatch as it closes in on him. He's ultimately hauled in as well, but they cover the gap quickly. Jim sees the hull has multiple breaches after swiftly correcting the issue. They follow the meteor's route and learn that it collided with the reactor. Command from a computer. Jim is confident that he will be able to locate replacement parts. They track down the part and replace it, but the reactor's venting system continues to malfunction. They try it manually again, but it fails again. They find out that Jim needs to open the ship's vent door from the outside, so they go ahead and do it. Can lower the reactor's temperature. As they approach the airlock, he hands Aurora Mancuso's bracelet to her because he may not return. As he walks into the airlock, she aids him with the suit and tells him to return. She won't be able to survive aboard the ship if he isn't with her. Aurora returns to the reactor, which has reached dangerous temperatures. A bolt from the reactor inserts itself into her arm as Jim approaches the reactor vent. He notices the door as he glances out the window. As he tries to open the vent door by bypassing it, the temperature in the reactor room rises. He rapidly discovers that he must manually hold the reactor door open in order for it to vent. He notifies Aurora of the situation. Despite her opposition, he goes ahead with the plan and directs her to vent the reactor. She does not want him to die, but he tells her that they must save the planet. She also uses the help of others to vent the reactor. Despite the fact that the procedure is successful, the nuclear gases push Jim away and cause him to lose his grip. The pressure in his suit is also decreasing. Aurora receives word of the incident and hurries to another suit to bring him in. Once more, he conveys his regret to her. She gets dressed and goes out in search of him, but her tether is too short. She's being shoved back, but she grabs his leash and pulls him in. When Aurora brings Jim into the hospital, she discovers that he has already passed away. She resuscitates Mancuso by bypassing medical regulations by utilizing his bracelet. Jim is revived by the medical pod, which performs the task automatically. Aurora accepts his apologies gratefully. Mancuso is resurrected in space after Aurora recovers Arthur. Jim takes her to the hospital and tells her that he has discovered how to use the medical pod. As if it had entered a state of dormancy, he instructs her to enter the pod and remain there for the length of the trip. She, on the other hand, declines and opts to stay awake on the ship with him. Jim eventually proposes to her, and the two spend the rest of their lives together on the ship. The Avalon arrives in Homestead after 88 years. When the crew wakes up, they find the ship in a strange state. Aurora writes them a letter in which she describes her and Jim's time on the ship while the rest of the crew slept. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Thank you for watching.